Hey gang, SpongeBob Prime here, and today we're going to be taking a look at upgrading our Secret Lair deck from Cute to Brute. Now what we're going to be doing with this deck is we're going to be taking this deck apart, pulling 10 cards out, and putting 10 cards back in the deck to spice up our gameplay plan. Now for those of you who don't know, this deck came out May 8th, was shipped May 10th. So this deck has been out for about 5 months now. And I figured, hey, it's about time that I upgrade this deck, because it is not doing me any good in my pod, even though I thoroughly enjoy this deck. So, with that out of the way, let us upgrade this deck. Alrighty, so we are back with the cards that we had pulled out of the deck, because to me, these cards make no sense to have in the deck, and we are also trying to reduce our mana cost a wee bit and speed up our game plan. So, the first card we pulled out was Voldaren Pariah. She was pulled out because she has no ETB abilities, and her backside really doesn't do you any good. Plus, on the front side, to transform her, you have to sacrifice 3 of your own creatures. Moving that out of the way, our next card is Butcher of Malakir. The reason why we're taking Butcher out of the deck is because he is a very big target of removal, and 7 mana is a bit expensive to pay for a vampire. So, going to our next card here, we have Hadana's Climb. Hadana's Climb is a legendary enchantment with, at the beginning of combat on your turn, put a +1/+1 counter on target creature you control. Then if that creature has 3 or more +1/+1 counters on it, transform Hadana's Climb. We're taking this card out because this card works a little too slow in my opinion, and the backside doesn't really serve you any justice. So, going to our next card, we have Shale, Dean of Radiance, and Embrose, Dean of Shadows. Now, the reason why we're taking this card specifically out is because this deck doesn't really deal in +1/+1 counters. It actually has more to do with putting tokens onto the battlefield and filling your graveyard up. So, we're taking this card out and our last few cards out to add to that strategy. So, for our next card, we have Zatalpa, Primal Dawn. The reason why I'm taking this card out is because I just don't really see the point in this card. It's too big, too clunky, and by the time it comes out, somebody already has their game engine going. So we're taking this out to make room for an even better game engine. The next card is Diluvian Primordial. Now, the reason why I'm taking out Diluvian Primordial is because by the time I eventually get this out, either somebody's graveyard is not full or there are no instants or sorceries in there for me to grab. And plus, for 7 mana, I can do a lot more with 7 mana. So, goodbye. For the next card, we have Tovolar's Huntmaster. For 4 and 2 green, it is a creature human werewolf. When Tovolar's Huntmaster enters the battlefield, create 2/2/2 green wolf creature tokens. It also deals with the day-bound, night-bound cycle, but the reason why we're taking this card out is because we have enough token creators, and I don't need any more cards than what there already is in the deck dealing with the day and night cycle. Now for the next one, we have Elbrus the Binding Blade. It is 7 mana cost legendary artifact equipment. Equipped creature gets +1/+0 and has, whenever equipped creature deals combat damage to a player, unattach Elbrus the Binding Blade, then transform it with an equipped cost of 1. Transforms into Withengar Unbound. It has Flying, Intimidate, and Trample, and has, whenever a player loses the game, put 13 +1/+1 counters on Withengar Unbound. The problem with this card here, there's already a problem with trying to get it to transform, because as soon as it comes into play, someone is automatically going to remove it or create a bunch of tokens, thus making it harder for us to get it to transform. Also, with this backside, since it is so scary, it's never going to transform. So for 7 mana, I think we can use that somewhere else. Goodbye. For our last 2 cards, we have Harmonize and Dinnick, Pious Apprentice. Now, with Harmonize, moving Dinnick out of the way here, with Harmonize for 4 mana, draw 3 cards. There's already cards in the deck that do a lot more for a lot less mana. So, excuse me. So removing this card out of our deck does us a favor and makes more room for better cards to make use out of our graveyard with. Now, with Dinnick, we're pulling him out because we want to actually target cards in our graveyard, and his backside really doesn't do much for you. So, plus whenever he dies on his backside, he exiles himself, so removing him out of this deck solves our problem entirely. Now, our first card going into the deck is Invasion of Chandalar. The reason why Invasion of Chandalar is going into the deck is because of the back, Leyline Surgence, or Leyline Surge. Leyline Surge is an enchantment with at the beginning of your upkeep you may put a permanent card from your hand onto the battlefield. The good thing about Leyline Surge and Invasion of Chandalar is the fact that it really does wonders and works well with our commander, Aseko God of the Tree, the Prismatic Bridge, and works well with other cards that put cards from our library onto the battlefield. Our next card is Skrelv Defector Might. Now, the reason why we have Skrelv Defector Might is because of this bottom ability here. With Pay Phyrexian White, tap it, choose a color, another target creature you control gains Toxic 1 and Hexproof from that color until end of turn. It can be blocked by creatures of that color this turn. Now, Skrelv is going into this deck to help out our Archangel Avacyn in the deck, so giving a little more protection to at least one of our big creatures makes our game plan a little easier to work with. Next card going into the deck is Wrenn and Realmbreaker. Now, for those of you who already know what Wrenn and Realmbreaker does, kudos to you. Because the reason why I'm adding Wrenn and Realmbreaker to this deck is because not of her passive or her +1. It is that -2 and 7, the reason why we are adding her into this deck. Now, her -2 has mill 3 cards. You may put a permanent card from among the milled cards into your hand, which allows you to essentially, if you don't have a land in your hand, mill 3 cards, put a land into your hand so you can play it this turn. And her -7 allows you to get an emblem with you may play a land. You may play lands and cast permanent spells from your graveyard, essentially making your graveyard a secondary library, which is pretty powerful in my opinion. Setting her off to the side now, our next card is Narset Enlightened Exile. The best thing about Narset Enlightened Exile is she is a miniature Narset Enlightened Master, costing just 2 mana less, giving your creature's prowess, and has the ability of whenever she attacks, exile target non-creature, non-land card with mana value less than Narset's power from a graveyard and copy it. You may cast the copy without paying its mana cost. Now, the difference between Narset Enlightened Exile and Enlightened Master is that this Narset fiddles with your graveyard, while Narset Enlightened Master deals with the top 4 cards of your library. Which I really love this Narset more than I do Enlightened Master, because this can easily be a wombo combo for extra turn decks, or like I have her in this deck, filling my graveyard up to cast anything that is not a land or a creature from my graveyard to the battlefield. Essentially buffing that prowess ability on every one of my creatures and forwarding my game plan all that much better. Link your best creatures and you get them back on your next upkeep. So, now, granting your creatures haste as long as you have a Sequel on the battlefield allows them to tap for mana, or if they already have a tap ability and this is on the battlefield, you can do whatever that tap ability does. And that's what makes this card really, really shine in this deck. And being able to blink your biggest creatures and your best creatures is the best part about this card. So, that is why we're adding Nahiri's Resolve to the deck. Now, for our next card, it is Ayara, Widow of the Realm. Now, the reason why I put her into the deck is to focus on her front side, allowing you to gain life and dealing damage to target opponent or your Invasion of Chandalar that we just talked about, and you gaining life. Now the back side is really good and all, but the front side is where it's really at in this deck. So, and it also puts cards into your graveyard, filling up our graveyard for future turns and more explosive turns with graveyard shenanigans. Next up is Heliod the Radiant Dawn. Now the reason why we added Heliod to the deck was not because of his front side, but because of his backside. His backside is a Vidalcan Orrery, and your spells cost 1 less to cast for each card your opponents have drawn this turn. So adding a Vidalcan Orrery into the deck and making your spells cost 1 less to cast is all the more better, making your spells cheaper and eventually reducing the overbearing commander tax that'll be inevitably put onto a Sika. Moving on here, we have Vorinclex. Yes, that Vorinclex that comes from March of the Machines. Now, the reason why we have him in here is for more ramp, and more specifically, his backside. Now, his backside allows us to put more cards into our graveyard, giving our creatures a bigger, better buff, and then also allowing our creatures, when this thing comes back as Vorinclex, allowing our creatures to fight our opponent's creatures. And if I do say so myself, that is a really, really good thing to add to this deck. Now our second to last card is Etali Primal Conqueror. Now this card, putting this card in this deck makes this card extremely flexible, because we're putting this card in the deck for its front side, inevitably allowing us to cast our opponent's library, if done right. But if that gets too boring for you, its backside is even better, because it is a smaller Blightsteel Colossus and allows you to end games a lot more quicker for your opponents. Now, for our last card here, for the 10 cards we are adding in there, we are adding Primeval's Glorious Rebirth for 5 red and black legendary sorcery. You may cast legendary sorcery only if you control a legendary creature or planeswalker, which with this secret lair deck you are more than likely going to be able to cast. Primeval's Glorious Rebirth allows you to return all legendary permanent cards from your graveyard to the battlefield, which is why we are adding an even better mill strategy to the deck. So eventually, if we last long enough, we can cast this spell and win the game, killing all of our opponents. And with that, I hope you enjoyed our little upgrade guide for the Secret Lair deck from Cute to Brute. Don't forget to like, comment, share, and subscribe, and let me know what you think in the comments. So with that, Spongimus Prime is signing out.